Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a 10-game Major League Baseball slate that starts at 1:35. Make sure to drop a comment below with your home run calls. Patrick Bush called Mike Trout yesterday and got that one, so let's go ahead and get into our core plays. Before I get started, though, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really helps the channel. For the core plays here on DraftKings, I have Jacob deGrom at pitcher and Jonah Heim at catcher. Over on FanDuel, we have deGrom at pitcher and Correa and Buxton in the lineup here. Overall, I think deGrom is just the top overall pitcher, and it's not very close because he's also got a good matchup against Oakland, so he's definitely a great option on the slate. With that said, let's get into our slate here, though, for pitching to start on DraftKings. First of all, deGrom, obviously he's a core play for me. He's priced up a bit, but his K rate is super high, and he's the best on the slate by far. He's also got the best matchup against Oakland, and while he is pretty expensive, and there's a couple other options that are close to being as expensive as him, he is definitely the best slate option on this one. But if you want an alternative to him, Clayton Kershaw definitely has some unique upside here, though it is a tough matchup against Chicago Cubs, who've been hitting the ball pretty well in this series. And it is a tough matchup. He has really good upside. He's got a low floor in this one, though, just because of the matchup, but he definitely has good upside as well. He's also done pretty decent against them in the past. Grayson Rodriguez is in a very interesting spot here for Baltimore. Now, he hasn't been particularly great to start the season, but he's so cheap that he has some upside here if he can get 15 to 20 fantasy points. He's also got a good opportunity for a win because Baltimore looks like it's a pretty decent team in this matchup. And I do think that he has some upside here. He is risky, though, just because he's not a great pitcher, but he definitely has the price that makes him viable here and will help you pay up in the other position players as you will. And not only that, but there's not a ton of great options that are cheaper to really choose from. Zach Eflin is going to be drawn up today for the Tampa Bay Rays, it looks like. He'll be good to go today, it should be. So as long as he does draw the start, he is worth consideration here against the Chicago White Sox. Now, he only had 3 wins last season and 14 starts before he moved to the bullpen. But he did have 3 games over 19 fantasy points, and he also had he's also started 2 games this year, both of those games having 20 fantasy points, and he has 12 strikeouts in those 2 games, as well as only 4 earned runs giving up. This matchup is decent enough to make him a consideration at P2, but he's high risk, high reward, so do keep that in mind. And then Corbin Burns, he's probably the best option outside of deGrom, to be honest here. At $9,200, he has some good upside. He has been up and down to start the season, but he's had some really good he's had one really good game against Arizona, and he's gotten 2 wins so far this season, so he's got some ability here. And this is a decent matchup, even though Boston is a pretty tough team. They sometimes do have bad games, and while he's not the most consistent play, he is a decent option on this slate, which just lacks a lot of good P2 options. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into our catchers. We're going to start with Danny Jansen here for Toronto. Now, he has some really nice upside in this matchup. He's boomer bust, though. He did hit a home run yesterday, and he hasn't played a ton of games this season, but when he does play, he does have some opportunity. But again, he's not hitting the ball particularly well to start the year, so we'll have to. He is a boomer bust option. Ryan Jeffers is also another guy that I think has some utility here for Minnesota. If you go with a Minnesota stack, he's somebody that you could utilize. He has some decent upside here and home run potential. And then also, my favorite play, though, is Jonah Heim, who's just hitting the ball extremely well. And with a Texas stack, he looks like a really good option on the slate. I should mention my stackable teams today are Minnesota, Texas, Toronto, and Tampa Bay, so do keep those in mind. Then we're going to move on to first base here, and Vlad Jr. is obviously a top-tier option here. He's been hitting the ball really well to start the year. He had a home run 2 games ago. He's been hitting a home run every other game the last few games, so this would be a good situation for him to do it again. He's got a great matchup here and a lot of good upside. Jose Abreu is a really good option for Houston. Now, he's got a tough matchup against Max Fried, but Houston's been getting to Atlanta's pitching so far this series, and I look for him to have a good opportunity to have a big game here. He's got home run potential, and I was close to having him as a core play with the exception of the fact there's just too many good options at this position. Brandon Belt is also very interesting for Toronto. Now, he's high risk, high reward, kind of a Hail Mary play here, but he has some utility, especially if you do a Toronto stack and you don't want to pay up for Vlad. He's a good way to get a lot of Toronto mixed in here. Then Rowdy Talese from Milwaukee. He's just been hitting the ball extremely well. He's had 2 straight home run games, and I look for him to continue that here. He's high risk but high reward in this situation. Then we'll look at Ryan Mountcastle, who's a little bit expensive, but he definitely has some upside in this matchup. I do like Baltimore in this game. It is going to be somewhat hard to do a build with them, but he is definitely viable on the slate, especially if you pay down at the pitching perspective. Then we'll look at second baseman Brennan Lowe, who is very close to being a core play on the slate, though his price is super expensive. He's got really good upside. He's had some really good games so far this year, and he's got nice potential in this matchup. Then we'll look at Jonathan India. Now, this position is really kind of rough, but Jonathan India definitely has some utility here. He's hit the ball really well. He hasn't really hit too many home runs yet this season, but he is hitting the ball solidly. He's definitely worth a look. Some value plays here. Jorge Polanco. I don't really think he's got big time stuff here, but he definitely has hitting potential. He's had hits in his first 2 games this season. I look for him to continue to score at least some fantasy points, but he's really kind of a rough option on this particular slate. And then Marcio Dubon for Houston. Now, he's just hitting the ball okay. He hasn't had too many big games. He's had a couple, though. He hadn't hit a home run or anything. But he is kind of a Hail Mary play on the slate. Then we'll look at third base and Josh Young for Texas. He's one of my favorite plays on the slate. Almost a core play as well. But again, he's a little bit overpriced here. But he's been hitting the ball very well in the last few games, and he's got home run potential in this matchup. Then we'll look at Jose Miranda, who I actually think has some really nice upside in this matchup in the Minnesota stack. He's high risk, high reward, though. Nearly a Hail Mary play, but he is hitting the ball good enough the last few games to make him worth a look. But obviously, we need him to score around 10 fantasy points, but it is a good matchup against Patrick Corbin. And then Jane Segura for Miami. He has some nice upside here. He's been high risk, high reward, though. Kind of a Hail Mary play again. If you don't want to use Young, he's not a bad option to go to. Then we're going to look at the shortstop position with Carlos Correa, and he seems like a really good play, almost a core play as well. The only thing that's really been a rough thing for him is his batting average has been very inconsistent to start the year, but he's got home run potential in this one, so he's definitely worth a look. Jeremy Pena also has some really nice upside in this matchup for Houston. He's kind of in a similar aspect of Correa, as he's a little bit overpriced, but he has some potential. And then if you want to pay up at this position, or you want to get a Milwaukee stack going, Willy Adames is a really good option to pair with Rowdy Talese as a good, unique Milwaukee stack. So let's move on into the outfielders, and we're going to start with James Outman, who has just been crushing the ball like crazy lately. He's got some really nice upside and has great potential here. Then we're going to look in Arodys Garcia for Texas. I just wanted to point him out because he hit 3 home runs yesterday, so I don't expect him to do that again, but he definitely has some upside in this matchup. He's pretty expensive, though. Aaron Judge is also available here as a good option. Now, he's way expensive as well, but he definitely has some nice upside. It's been a few games since he hit a home run, but he really hasn't been hitting the ball as well as we really want him to be a viable day-to-day option. Byron Buxton looks like a really solid play today against Corbin. He's got really good metrics for this matchup, and he hit a home run yesterday. It finally looks like he might start to get going, as he's got some hits in 3 straight games, including 2 doubles and a home run in those 3. So he looks like maybe he's finally starting to get going, and if that's the case, then he's definitely worth a look here. Jesse Winker for Milwaukee is a really good option for a Milwaukee stack. He hasn't hit the ball particularly well to start the season, but he does have home run potential, and so he's definitely in play here. Jack Selewinski for Pittsburgh is also a really good spot. I really do like his upside in this matchup. It is a tougher matchup against Hunter Green, but he's been hitting the ball pretty hard, and so that's really what we like here. And so he's got some nice potential in this situation. And then we're going to look at Kerry Carpenter for Detroit. He has a lot of upside in this matchup. He's kind of a bit of a bust play, though. He, just like most state games when he's available, He has that home run potential, but he's pretty much the only guy on Detroit that's been doing anything. Anthony Santander is a really good option for Baltimore. Despite his low batting average, he's got some really good metrics here. Kind of nearly a boomer bust option, but he has utility, and he's definitely worth a look. Austin Hayes has been a really good player for Baltimore lately, and he's hitting the ball extremely well, and he has nice potential here in this matchup, though he is a little bit risky due to his price being a little bit higher than I'd like it to be. I wish, anytime it's under $4,000, it's definitely in play. Then we'll look at Dalton Varsho as our last play here on DraftKings. He has some high risk, high reward as he hasn't hit the ball particularly well to start the year, but he's got home run potential here. I do wish he was in the catching position still, but as a good alternative there, but he still has good utility here in the outfield. Let's go ahead and move over to FanDuel here, though, and get in here on our pitchers. Now, I do think DeGrom is the best option here. Despite him being pretty expensive, he's definitely viable, and you can fit in different guys to help play him. If you want, so most of the other pitchers are a little bit over expensive here on FanDuel. Unfortunately, like there's not any super cheap guys that make you just jump off the page to want to utilize them, and so he's really the best option here. But if we move into the catchers and first baseman, Vlad Jr. has some really nice upside. Obviously pretty expensive at $3,900, but he is a top tier option on the slate. He's hitting the ball extremely well, and he has nice upside in this matchup. Jose Abreu for Houston is kind of in a rough spot, but he has a good matchup here, and he's got home run potential on the slate. And he was very borderline a core play if it wasn't for the fact that he's facing Max Fried, but he definitely has the upside. Brandon Belt is very cheap for Toronto and a good contrarian option on the slate. He's high risk, high reward. Kind of a Hail Mary call, but he's definitely worth taking a look. And then Nathaniel Lowe for Texas, he looks like a really solid option on the slate. He's been hitting the ball pretty solid so far this season, and he has nice potential in this on this particular slate. Marcus Semien for second base, looking really solid as a top tier option for Texas in this position, and also for a Texas stack, he's a really good way to get that started. Brandon Lowe is also a very good option here for Tampa Bay. While I don't think Tampa Bay is going to score as many runs as they have been scoring, this is the guy I do think will have the most upside in this matchup. Then Jonathan India has some utility here, but he's a little bit overpriced. But he's hitting the ball solidly, and so if he can continue that, then he's definitely worth consideration here. And then for a value cheap play here, Jorge Polanco for Minnesota, where he's kind of high risk, high reward, considering he's only played 2 games so far, but he has some utility here in this matchup. And then we'll move up to third base here and look at Josh Jung for Texas. He's got some high risk here, but he's got a great matchup for Houston, and I really think for Texas rather, and I think he's got a good matchup where he's definitely worth taking a look at. Bregman is also a very good, interesting option here on FanDuel because of his price being somewhat reduced. He's got a tough matchup against Atlanta, but he has hit the ball pretty well lately, and so as long as he can continue to hit the ball pretty well, then he has some nice upside. He's getting lots of hits. He's just not doing much with them. Just a matter of time before he starts breaking out. Then we'll look at Austin Riley, who's a little bit pricey at $3,500 for FanDuel's perspective, and he's got a tougher matchup, but he definitely has some utility here. He's definitely worth a look. And then Jane Shigera for Miami, he has some nice upside despite the fact that he hasn't hit the ball very well to start the year. He's had five hits in the last 5 games, and he's got some upside in this situation. So I really do like him as an upside pick. Correa is a core play here for shortstop. He is a great option on the slate, just being way underpriced. Even though he hadn't hit the ball particularly great to start the year, he's got some really good opportunity here to have a good game. He also had 3 hits yesterday, and so this cheap price definitely makes him help pay up for some other options. But Jeremy Pena is a good alternative. He's also hit the ball pretty up and down to start the year, but he has some nice upside in this matchup. And then Willy Adames, if you can afford to pay up a little bit here, he would definitely be a way to get a Milwaukee stack going on this particular slate. And then moving into the outfield, James Outman, he's a top tier option on the slate. He's been hitting the ball extremely well, hitting .315. He's had 47 plus fantasy point games the last few games. He's also got stolen base potential, even though he hadn't done that in a few games, in quite a few games for that matter. But he has some nice upside in this matchup, and he's definitely worth consideration. Aaron Judge obviously has a lot of upside in this matchup, but he's high risk, high reward. Then we'll look at Adolis Garcia for Texas. If you want to go with a Texas stack, he's a little bit underpriced actually for what he's been doing lately, and so he has some nice upside here. He is high risk, high reward, but he had a massive game yesterday, so I felt like he's worth taking a look at. Byron Buxton seems a little bit underpriced here and is a core play. He had a home run yesterday. I look for him to continue to hit some home runs and get that batting average up. He's starting to hit the ball pretty well the last couple games, so as long as he can continue that, he's definitely worth consideration here. Jesse Winker for Milwaukee also looks like a really solid option today. He has some nice upside here. High risk, high reward, though, because he hasn't hit a home run yet, but he does have that potential, and it's just a matter of time before he does. And then Jorge Soler for Miami. He is in a pretty good spot. He's a little bit underpriced here on FanDuel, which gives him some nice upside in this situation. Then, last but not least, Jake Fraley for Cincinnati. He has some nice utility here. He's high risk, high reward. He hasn't hit the ball particularly well, but he does have some home run potential in this matchup. He is a Hail Mary call. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.